Alright, let's set the scene. You've got your standard Class 4 gladiatorial hexadome. Polished obsidian floors, humming containment fields shimmering with the tasteful ozone blue, and a crowd of several thousand aliens who all look like evolution got drunk and started mixing Lego sets. There are insectoids with crustacean arms, gelatinous blobs wearing surprisingly fashionable hats, and at least one species that appears to be just a sentient, angry crystal formation. Standard Tuesday in the Xylocyon Commonwealth. In the center of it all, under the glare of 3 artificial suns, stood the champions. On one side, you had Grak the Skullcrusher. Grak was a Gorzon, which is a polite way of saying he was a bipedal landslide with anger management issues. His skin was the color and texture of granite, his fists were the size of prize-winning hams, and his pre-battle ritual involved headbutting a nearby wall until the wall apologized. Next to him, Xylith the Swift, Avtari assassin, all sleek chitin and vibrating antennae, looking bored in that terrifying way only creatures who can liquefy your insides with a single touch can. And then there was the human. Her name was Anya Sharma, and she looked less like a gladiator and more like someone who had gotten very, very lost on her way to a yoga class. She wore simple gray athletic leggings and a moisture-wicking t-shirt with the logo of a Terran sporting goods company. No armor. No vibroblades. No intimidating facial tattoos. She was stretching her hamstrings. The crowd, a multi-species cacophony of clicks, roars, and wet bubbling noises, was not impressed. A wave of derisive laughter echoed through the hexadome. The Grand Proctor, a Xylocyon named Forelag, floated on his ceremonial disc, all 4 of his mouths frowning in 4 distinct directions. Xylocyons were tall, spindly beings with skin like petrified wood and a biological insistence on bureaucracy. Forelag was the most bureaucratic of them all. Champion of Earth, Forelag's primary mouth boomed, his voice synthesized into a stentorian baritone that vibrated in your teeth. You stand before the conclave of judgment. Your presence is unorthodox. This was Xylocyon 4. What in the name of the sacred 17 regulations are you wearing? Grak the Skullcrusher let out a low chuckle that sounded like rocks in a cement mixer. Puny human, he rumbled, not unkindly. The proctor means you will be a fine paste before the first sun sets. Xylith didn't even look at her. Her antennae twitched, probably calculating the precise trajectory to sever Anya's spinal cord in under a nanosecond. Anya finished her stretch and straightened up. She gave a polite, noncommittal nod to the proctor. Noted, she said, her voice calm and even. She rolled her shoulders, then her wrists. The crowd's laughter swelled again. She was wearing a pair of thick, dull gray bracelets on her wrists and matching bands on her ankles. They looked like cheap fitness accessories, a pathetic attempt to appear athletic. Lord Kthar, the champion for the opposing faction and a 7-foot-tall warrior who looked like a demon designed by a heavy metal album cover artist, sneered from across the arena. Does the mammal require her trinkets for comfort? Perhaps a pacifier as well. Anya ignored him. She looked at Proctor Forelag. Proctor, just to confirm, pursuant to Codex Bellorum, page 942, subsection Delta, paragraph 3, all personal effects not explicitly designated as weaponry or prohibited armor are permitted within the arena until the commencement of hostilities, correct? A stunned silence fell. Not the dramatic kind. The awkward, confused kind, like when someone uses the word whom correctly in a casual conversation. Proctor Forelag's secondary and tertiary mouths opened and closed silently for a moment. He consulted the floating data slate beside him. His reedy, natural voice squeaked from his 4th mouth. Ah, yes. That is, technically accurate. Excellent, Anya said brightly. Hostilities commence upon the sounding of the ceremonial gong, as per page 28, subsection Alpha, paragraph 1. Indeed, Forelag boomed from his primary mouth, regaining his composure. He was about to give the signal to let this farce finally end. Anya nodded. Then, with a casual flick of her thumbs, she unclasped the bracelet on her right wrist. It didn't just fall. It plummeted. The bracelet, no bigger than a donut, hit the obsidian floor with a deafening crack. A web of fractures instantly spread from the point of impact. The entire hexadome seemed to shudder. The deep, resonant thump of the impact echoed in the sudden, absolute silence. It wasn't a trinket. It was a high-density, gravimetrically plated training weight. A 50-kilo one, to be precise. She unclasped the second one. Crack thump. Another spiderweb of cracks. The floor beneath her now looked like a shattered windshield. Then she unfastened the anklets. Crack thump. Crack thump. Each impact was a physical blow, a sound that carried the sheer, unbelievable weight of the objects. The laughter had died. Utterly. Grak's rocky jaw was hanging open. Xylitha's antennae had frozen mid-twitch, aimed directly at the four small, dense objects lying in the shattered pits they'd created. Lord Kthar's sneer had evaporated, replaced by an expression of profound, sphincter-clenching dread. Anya rotated her newly freed wrists, a faint smile on her lips. The air around her seemed to shimmer. She wasn't a warrior who had added weights for training. She was a marathon runner who had just dropped 200 kilograms of resistance she'd been wearing for the past 6 months. She looked up at the dumbfounded Proctor. Ready when you are. The silence that followed was a whole new animal. It was heavy, respectful, and deeply, deeply confused. And a little bit terrified. So, how in the name of interstellar diplomacy did a logistics coordinator end up in a gladiatorial deathmatch over a shipment of cheese? Bureaucracy, my friends. Glorious, weaponized bureaucracy. It all started, as most galactic incidents do, with paperwork. Specifically, Form 8814 Gamma, the Interspecies Perishable Goods Manifest. Anya Sharma's job for the Terran Diplomatic Corps was to make sure these forms were filled out correctly. She was a master of minutiae, a high priestess of the triplicate form, a woman who could find a misplaced comma at 50 paces. Her life was a symphony of timestamps, tracking numbers, and color-coded binders. It was, in a word, predictable. The Xylosian Commonwealth, however, ran on a different operating system. They revered tradition and ancient law codes to a degree that made other species look like anarchists. Their entire legal framework was built on the Great Codex, a collection of texts so old and convoluted that no living Xylosian had actually read the whole thing. They just revered its existence and let their legal bots handle the interpretations. The dispute was simple. Earth had sent a shipment of artisanal Alderaanian blue cheese to the Xylosian sector governor as a goodwill gesture. The governor's faction, the haughty Kthar Dominion, claimed the cheese had arrived, well, insufficiently pungent. They declared it a grave insult. The Terran ambassador insisted the cheese was perfectly aged, citing its robust aromatic profile. The Kthar Dominion invoked Clause 7 of the Prolix Treaty of yesteryear, which stated that trade disputes of significant olfactory offense must be settled by honorable adjudication combat. This is where things went off the rails. The Terran ambassador, a well-meaning but flustered man named Philip, tried to file a motion to dismiss, citing the treaty's absurdity. The Xylosian legal bots cross-referenced his motion with the Great Codex and found an obscure addendum: any challenge to an honor duel must be answered by the challenger's designated champion of record. Earth, having never engaged in an honor duel before, didn't have a champion of record. The bots, in their infinite wisdom, followed the protocol for a vacant designation. They defaulted to the nearest available Terran citizen with level 4 administrative clearance who was physically present on the homeworld. That person was Anya Sharma, who had been in the building to get Philip to sign off on a new filing cabinet requisition. 1 minute she was arguing the merits of lateral versus vertical file storage, the next a very serious-looking Xylosian proctor was handing her a ceremonial spear and a copy of the combatant's orientation pamphlet. There must be a mistake, Anya had said, holding the spear like it was a dead fish. The codex is never mistaken, Proctor Forlag had intoned, all 4 of his mouth set in grim lines. You are Earth's champion. Prepare for glory. Anya looked from the spear to the pamphlet, which featured a helpful diagram on how to properly disembowel a Gorzon. My glory is generally related to achieving a 15% reduction in shipping-related damages. This seems outside my purview. But the decision was binding. The entire diplomatic corps was in an uproar. Lawyers were scrambled, communiques were sent, but the Xylosian system was as flexible as a fossil. The duel was locked in. Anya Sharma, logistics coordinator, was going to fight. The Terran ambassador, sweating profusely, had offered her a crash course in combat training from the embassy's security chief. Anya politely declined. Instead, she asked for one thing: a full, searchable, digital copy of the Xylosian Great Codex and all 7,412 of its addendums and historical precedents. and a pot of very strong coffee. For the next 3 weeks, she didn't touch a weapon. She read. She cross-referenced. She highlighted. She made spreadsheets. The security chief would occasionally peek into her office, where she'd be muttering things like, "Fascinating. So, ceremonial footwear regulations haven't been updated since the Bronze Age, which means technically, Durasteel combat boots are an unapproved sartorial modification." He would just slowly back away and close the door. Anya discovered that the Codex Bellorum, the specific set of rules for the arena, was a masterpiece of contradictory nonsense. It was a document written by 1,000 different committees over 10,000 years. It had rules for chariot combat right next to regulations for zero-gravity engagements. It specified the honorable way to sharpen a flint knife but had no opinion whatsoever on plasma rifles, because they hadn't been invented yet. It was a system designed to be revered, not used. And Anya was a woman who knew how to use a system. That's where the weights came in. She wasn't training for a fight. She was preparing for a marathon she knew she'd have to run. But more importantly, she found a loophole. Page 942, subsection Delta, paragraph 3, a champion's person shall be free of all non-ceremonial augmentation. This excludes items of personal significance, traditional garb, or tools for physical conditioning, provided they are not activated or wielded as a weapon. The rule was written to allow for lucky charms and religious amulets. The Xyloceans, who viewed physical exercise as a deeply undignified activity for laborers, never imagined someone would interpret tools for physical conditioning as 200 kilograms of high-density tungsten alloy. It was perfectly legal. She filed the requisite Form 22C to declare them as such. No one even read it. It was just filed away by a bored administrative drone. So when she stepped into that arena, she wasn't just a logistics coordinator. She was a rules lawyer armed with the most powerful weapon in the universe, the ability to actually read the terms and conditions. The first event was called the Trial of the Sunstone. It sounded very epic and mystical. It was, in practice, manual labor. Each champion had to transport a large, perfectly spherical, and absurdly heavy stone from the arena floor to the top of a 100-meter-tall ziggurat. The stone was sacred, you see. It represented the founding star of the Xylocean Commonwealth, or something. Mostly, it represented a really effective way to cause hernias. Grak the Skullcrusher went first. He approached the sunstone with a roar that shook the cheap seats. He wrapped his massive arms around it, muscles bulging like sacks of angry cats, and with a grunt that registered on local seismographs, he lifted it. He began to stomp up the ziggurat steps, one agonizingly slow, thudding step at a time. It was impressive. It was honorable. It was also profoundly stupid. Xylith the Swift was next. Being of Tari, she was all about efficiency of movement. She couldn't lift the stone, but she could move it. She got behind it and began to push, using her lightning-fast leg movements to roll it up the shallow incline of the steps. It was faster than Grak, but still a grueling, exhausting process. The crowd roared its approval for both. This was honor. This was struggle. Then it was Anya's turn. She walked over to the edge of the arena, where a small, unassuming metal crate sat waiting for her. It was her personal effects container, permitted under arena regulations. The crowd murmured, wondering what secret Terran weapon she was about to unveil. A plasma cannon. A personal shield generator. She opened the crate and pulled out an anti-gravity cargo dolly. It was a standard-issue, warehouse-grade, floating pallet mover. The kind used to shift crates of nutrient paste and spare parts around a starship's cargo bay. It hummed with a low, functional thrum. A collective, galaxy-spanning "huh" rippled through the hexadome. Proctor Forelag floated forward, his primary mouth agape. Champion. What is the meaning of this contraption? It's a logistical aid, Anya said calmly, toggling the power switch. The dolly lifted a few inches off the ground. For conveying materials. This is the trial of the sunstone. Forelag sputtered, his other 3 mouths making agitated little popping noises. You are meant to carry the stone. To prove your strength. Your spirit. Your carrying things ability. Anya tilted her head. Proctor, with all due respect, could you direct me to the passage in the Codex Bellorum that specifies the method of conveyance? Forelag blinked. It is implied. It is tradition. Ah, but is it written? Anya pressed, her voice relentlessly pleasant. Because I was reading page 3417, subsection gamma, paragraph 9, which pertains to ceremonial processions and the transport of sacred artifacts. It clearly states that approved logistical aids of non-combative function may be utilized to prevent undue dishonor to the artifact through accidental slippage or dropping. I filed the approval request for this model last week. Form 7B, Alpha. It was approved this morning. The timestamp was 0800 Galactic Standard. The proctor's four mouths opened and closed like a quartet of confused fish. He frantically consulted his data slate. A bead of purple sweat trickled down his petrified wood forehead. He scrolled. He squinted. And then, a tiny, defeated squeak escaped his fourth mouth. She is correct. The crowd was utterly baffled. Lord Cthar, watching from the champion's dais, looked like he'd just been forced to watch a documentary about tax law. Anya calmly maneuvered the floating dolly next to the sunstone. She didn't even try to lift it. She just tipped it over onto the dolly's platform. With the press of a button, a low-level stasis field shimmered into place, locking the stone securely. She grabbed the controls, which looked suspiciously like a video game joystick, and began to float the sunstone towards the ziggurat. She didn't take the stairs. The stairs were for suckers. The rules said the stone had to reach the summit. It didn't say it had to travel over the surface of the ziggurat. Anya just angled the dolly upward and flew it in a straight, diagonal line to the top. The whole journey took about 45 seconds. She landed the dolly, gently rolled the sunstone onto its ceremonial pedestal, and dusted off her hands. By the time she floated the empty dolly back down, Grak was only halfway up, his face a mask of purple-tinged fury and exhaustion. Xylith was a little further, her chitinous plates slick with exertion. Anya walked back to her starting position, pulled a protein bar from her pocket, and began to eat it. The hexadome was so quiet you could hear the collective gears turning in 10,000 different alien brains. They had come for blood and honor. They had gotten a masterclass in logistics. Grak, halfway up the stairs, stopped, looked down at Anya calmly eating her snack, looked at the massive stone in his arms, looked back at Anya, and you could almost see the philosophical crisis happening behind his stony eyes. He wasn't just being outfought. He was being outthought. His entire concept of what strength meant was being systematically dismantled by a small woman with a cargo mover and an encyclopedic knowledge of bylaws. The second trial was announced, and if you thought the first one was dumb, strap yourself in. This was the labyrinth of ancestral echoes. It was an ancient maze constructed from towering, perfectly manicured hedges of a mildly psychotropic alien plant. The goal was to navigate the maze to find the chime of awakening at its center. The gimmick, according to tradition, was that the hedges would whisper the secrets of your ancestors to you, guiding your path. Or, if your ancestors were jerks, they'd lead you into dead ends. It was meant to be a spiritual journey, a test of a warrior's connection to their lineage. In reality, the psychotropic hedges just made you a bit dizzy and prone to existential crises. It was less ancestral wisdom, and more freshman year philosophy seminar. Grak, being a Gorzan, whose ancestors were mostly famous for hitting things, heard only a faint, angry buzzing. He decided on a new strategy: if you can't find the path, make one. He started punching his way through the hedges. This was a spectacularly bad idea. Not only were the hedges surprisingly dense, but punching them released a concentrated cloud of psychoactive pollen. Within minutes, Grak was sitting in a corner, weeping softly as he tried to explain the concept of friendship to his own fists. Xylith, being hypersensory, was immediately overwhelmed by the psychic noise. Her antennae drooped, her movements became erratic, and she spent most of her time hiding from what she claimed was the ghost of her great-aunt whispering critiques about her posture. Then came Anya. She entered the maze, took a deep breath of the weird-smelling air, and immediately pulled out a datapad. Proctor Forlag, who was now monitoring her with the intensity of a hawk watching a particularly devious mouse, floated over. Champion. What is this now? No technological aids are permitted to navigate the labyrinth. It is a trial of spirit. This isn't a navigational aid, Anya said, not looking up from her screen. It's a notepad. Permitted for personal record keeping, as per the equipment manifest I filed, she was using a simple mapping app, the kind you'd use to not get lost in a shopping mall. Besides, I'm not using it to find the path. I'm just using a simple maze-solving algorithm. The right-hand rule. You just put your right hand on a wall and follow it. It will eventually lead you to the exit. Or, in this case, the center. It's mathematically foolproof for a simple connect maze like this 1-inch. Forlag's primary mouth opened, then closed. He had no response. There was no rule against thinking. But Anya wasn't done. As she walked, she was doing something else. From a pouch on her belt, she was pulling out small, brightly colored squares of paper and sticking them to the hedges at every turn. They were sticky notes. One was neon pink. Another, fluorescent yellow. A third, electric blue. What? Forlag stammered, his voice cracking. What is that? Contingency planning, Anya said, pressing a green note firmly onto a leaf. Codex Bellorum, page 512, subsection Zeta, paragraph 2. Champions must take all reasonable precautions to ensure the structural and aesthetic integrity of the sacred arena grounds. Punching through the hedges, like Grak is doing, is technically vandalism. Getting hopelessly lost and having to be rescued by arena staff, which seems to be Xylith's plan, would cause undue disruption. I'm simply leaving a clear, non-destructive, and easily removable trail. Think of them as temporary ground markers for procession planning. She had found another loophole. The rule was intended to stop people from carving their initials into the ancient stone benches. She had repurposed it to allow for the use of office supplies. She followed her wall, leaving a trail of cheerful, color-coded notes behind her. She reached the center in 12 minutes. The chime of awakening was hanging there, shimmering softly. She rang it. A clear, beautiful tone echoed through the maze. Then she followed her own trail of sticky notes back to the entrance, collecting them as she went. She left no trace. By the time she was out, Grak was trying to arm wrestle a shrub, and Xylith was having a heated debate with a caterpillar. Anya had now won 2 events without throwing a single punch, breaking a single sweat, or even raising her voice. The crowd's mood had shifted from derision to a state of profound, almost religious confusion. They didn't know whether to cheer or demand a refund. This human wasn't playing the game. She was rewriting the rules. No, she was showing them that they had never bothered to learn the rules in the first place. Grak, once he'd been depollinated and had a nice long sit-down, was the first to convert. He lumbered over to her, his massive form blocking out one of the suns. He looked down at her, his craggy face a mixture of awe and bewilderment. "Human," he rumbled, his voice low. "Your methods are unconventionally efficient." "I just believe in working smarter, not harder," Anya replied, sipping from a water bottle. "This smarter," Grak said, gesturing vaguely with a hand that could crush a fusion reactor. "Teach me." From that point on, Grak became her unofficial, and very large, disciple. He'd follow her around, watching with rapt attention as she explained the finer points of supply chain management and inventory logistics. He didn't understand half of it, but he was deeply impressed by the flowcharts she drew. Xylith took longer to come around. As of Tari, she was a being of pure physical perfection and instinct. The idea of winning through paperwork was philosophically offensive to her. But after Anya helped her file a complaint, Form 1138-J, grievances pertaining to arena-induced psychological distress, that resulted in the labyrinth's psychotropic pollen levels being officially regulated, Xylith developed a grudging respect. It turned out that even hyperlethal assassins appreciated well-organized administrative action. The proctors, led by a perpetually flustered Forlag, were in a panic. Anya was making a mockery of their sacred traditions. They couldn't disqualify her, she hadn't broken a single rule. In fact, she was following the rules more closely than anyone in centuries. They were trapped by their own system. Desperate, they conferred with Lord Kthares' faction and made a decision. They would invoke the clause of finality, they would skip the remaining, equally ridiculous trials and go straight to the grand finale, the Gauntlet of Supremacy. A full-on, no-holds-barred melee. All champions in the ring. Last one standing wins the whole dispute. They thought they had her. In a straight fight, her clever tricks and regulatory jujitsu would mean nothing. There were very few loopholes in a punch to the face. The announcement was made, and a grim satisfaction settled over Lord Cthar. His moment had come. He would restore honor by reducing the little human rule reader to a fine red mist. The day of the gauntlet arrived. The hexadome was packed. The air crackled with anticipation. This time, there would be no dollies, no sticky notes. This would be combat. Pure and simple. The champions entered. Grak was there, now standing protectively near Anya. Xylith took up a position on her other side, her antennae no longer twitching with boredom but with focused intent. They weren't just co-competitors anymore. They were a team. The logistics squad. On the other side stood Lord Cthar and his two cronies, a pair of hulking, snarling brutes who made Grak look like a ballet dancer. Cthar brandished a massive power axe that hummed with malevolent energy. Proctor Forelag floated to the center of the arena. His voice boomed, laced with a new, steely edge. Champions. The gauntlet of supremacy begins. There is but one rule: victory. Let honor be decided. He deliberately omitted any references to the Codex. This was meant to be primal. The gong sounded. Chaos erupted. Cthar's brutes charged Grak, and the resulting collision sounded like two mountains having a disagreement. Xylith blurred into motion, engaging Lord Cthar in a dizzying dance of blades and feints, her speed against his raw power. And Anya. Anya started jogging. Not charging. Not fighting. She began a steady, measured jog around the perimeter of the arena. Her breathing was even, her pace consistent. She looked like she was on her morning run through the park. Lord Cthar, fending off Xylith's lightning-fast strikes, bellowed in frustration. Stand and fight, coward. Anya just kept jogging. She was conserving energy. She was observing. She was analyzing workflow. The fight was a chaotic system, and she was looking for the inefficiencies. The battle raged. Grak, in a feat of glorious, skull-crushing strength, managed to neutralize both of Cthar's cronies, but it took its toll. He was bruised, battered, and breathing heavily. Xylith was unbelievably fast, but Cthar was a fortress. His armor was too thick, his reach with the power axe too great. With a deft move, he managed to disarm Xylith, sending her skittering back with a gash on her arm. Slowly, inexorably, Cthar advanced. He had defeated her allies. Now, all that was left was the little human jogger. He stalked towards her, the humming of his axe the only sound in the suddenly tense arena. Nowhere left to run, little scribe, he snarled, raising the axe. Your book learning ends here. Anya stopped jogging. She faced him, not with fear, but with an almost serene calm. Her breathing was barely elevated. This was the moment she had been preparing for. This was the moment from the very beginning. Does the mammal require her trinkets for comfort? He mocked, echoing his words from the first day. Perhaps a pacifier as well. This is when she smiled. A small, knowing smile. And with a casual flick of her thumbs, she unclasped the bracelet on her right wrist. Crack thump. The arena floor, already scarred, fractured anew. The sound cut through the air like a gunshot. Cthar froze mid-sneer. She unclasped the second. Crack thump. Then the anklets. Crack thump. Crack thump. 4 pits in the floor. 200 kilograms of dead weight, gone. Anya rolled her shoulders. She bounced lightly on the balls of her feet. The air around her didn't just shimmer, it seemed to bend. For months, every step, every movement, every simple gesture she made had been a feat of strength. Now, she was free. The sudden, explosive potential in her muscles was staggering. Lord Cthar took an involuntary step back. The look on his face was the look of a predator who has just realized the fluffy little bunny it was hunting is actually the visible part of a much larger, much angrier subterranean monster. You're right, Anya said, her voice still calm, but now with an undercurrent of something new. Something dangerous. The book learning is over. She didn't charge him. She moved. To Cthar, it was like she had teleported. One moment she was 10 meters away, the next, she was right in front of him, a blur of gray fabric. She didn't throw a punch. She ran past him, her hand shooting out to slap the flat of his armored back. It wasn't an attack. It was a tag. He spun around, swinging his axe in a wild arc that could have cleaved a star shuttle in two. He hit nothing but air. Anya was already on the other side of the arena, her feet barely seeming to touch the ground. She was impossibly, ludicrously fast. What is this sorcery? Kthar roared, his confidence beginning to fray. It's called interval training, Anya called back, her voice not even strained. She wasn't a fighter. She was never going to be. She couldn't outpunch Grak or outmaneuver Xylith. But what she had was endurance. And now, she had speed. She wasn't trying to defeat Kthar. She was trying to exhaust him. She began to run circles around him. Literally. She was a gray blur, a phantom darting at the edges of his vision. Every time he thought he had a lock on her, she was gone. He swung his massive axe again and again, each swing a testament to his immense power, but each swing also a drain on his stamina. The axe was heavy. His armor was heavy. He was a monument of strength, but monuments are not built for cardio. He roared in frustration, abandoning technique for brute force, smashing his axe into the floor where she had been a microsecond before. Chips of obsidian flew through the air. The crowd was going wild, a frantic, roaring wave of sound. They were witnessing something they had never seen before, a warrior being defeated by a fitness regimen. Grak, watching from the sidelines, was pounding his chest. Run, logistics queen. Optimize his fatigue parameters, he bellowed, having clearly picked up some of the lingo. Anya continued her relentless, taunting dance. She wasn't just running. She was using the arena itself. She'd leap onto the low walls, skitter across the debris from Grak's earlier fight, using every surface to change her trajectory. She was an equation of motion Kthar simply couldn't solve. He was panting now, his movements becoming slower, more desperate. His swings were wilder. He was losing control. And that's when Anya saw her opening. It wasn't an opening to strike. It was an opening in the rulebook. In the center of the arena was the Proctor's Circle, a slightly raised dais marked with the 17 sacred sigils of Xylosian law. It was considered consecrated ground. Page 114, subsection beta, paragraph 7, no champion shall set foot within the Proctor's Circle during active combat, for to do so is to challenge the authority of the law itself. The penalty is immediate disqualification. It was an ancient, ceremonial rule no one had ever thought to invoke. Anya changed her pattern. She wasn't just running around him anymore. She was hurting him. With every pass, she subtly altered his position, forcing him to turn, to pivot, to take a step back. He was so consumed by rage and frustration, so focused on trying to land a single blow, that he didn't see it happening. She feinted left, he swung. She darted right, he stumbled. With one last, impossibly fast dash, she zipped directly past his right side, forcing him to pivot hard on his back foot to follow her. His heavy, armored boot came down with a clang. Right in the middle of the Proctor's Circle. On the sacred sigil of a balanced scale. The entire hexadome gasped. Anya skidded to a halt 20 meters away. She didn't gloat. She didn't strike a pose. She just turned, pointed a finger at Kthar's foot, and looked directly at Proctor Forelag. Proctor, she said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. Codex Bellorum. Page 114. Subsection beta. Paragraph 7-inch. Lord Kthar looked down. He saw the glowing sigil under his boot. The color drained from his face. He had been so focused on the physical fight that he had forgotten the legal one. He had forgotten that in a Xylosian arena, the Codex was the most powerful weapon of all. Proctor Forelag's four mouths worked silently for a full 10 seconds. This was it. The ultimate checkmate. She had used his own sacred, unbendable rules against him. There was no wiggle room. There was no interpretation. It was an absolute, clear-cut violation. To ignore it would be to undermine the very foundation of their society. With a shuddering, galaxy-sized sigh that seemed to carry the weight of 10,000 years of tradition being outsmarted by a mid-level administrator, Forelag raised his staff. Champion Lord Kthar, his primary mouth boomed, devoid of all emotion. You have violated the sanctity of the law. You are disqualified. A horn blared. The match was over. Anya Sharma, champion of Earth, was the victor. She had won the entire conflict without landing a single blow. The aftermath was, frankly, hilarious. The Kthar Dominion was forced to issue a formal apology and accept the shipment of cheese, which by now was pungent enough to be classified as a sentient life form. Anya was hailed as a hero. They didn't call her the Mighty or the Slayer on Xylos. She became a legend known as Anya Sharma, the lawbringer. Bards sang tales, not of her strength, but of her incredible grasp of regulatory minutiae. Parents told their children stories of how she defeated a great evil with a well-timed citation of a forgotten subsection. She was offered titles, riches, a position as a master strategist. She politely declined. All she wanted was for her requisition for a new, 5-drawer, lateral filing cabinet to be approved. It was. Immediately. Grak the Skullcrusher quit the gladiatorial circuit and became her personal assistant and head of security. His skull-crushing skills were now primarily used to open stubborn jam jars and intimidate uncooperative copy machines. He was, by all accounts, the happiest he'd ever been. Xylith, intrigued by this new form of combat, became a legal advocate, using her speed and precision to navigate the labyrinthine Xylosian court system. She became the most feared litigator in the sector. And Anya. She went back to her job, her desk, her color-coded binders. But things were a little different. No one ever questioned her paperwork again. Her memos were treated with the reverence of holy texts. When she walked down the halls of the embassy, hardened space marines would instinctively stand a little straighter. Because they all knew they were in the presence of the most dangerous person in the galaxy, a truly competent administrator. The story serves as a reminder that the greatest power isn't always the sharpest sword or the strongest fist. Sometimes, it's knowing the system better than the people who created it. And that, in a universe filled with chaos, there's nothing more beautifully, terrifyingly effective than a person who has actually read the rules. Especially when it's all over a batch of stinky cheese.